Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about a real pioneer of the digital age, someone who basically saw our modern world coming, like almost 200 years ago.
So let's kick things off with a question that sounds super simple, right? Who wrote the first computer program? Well, the answer is complicated and surprising. We've got to forget all about silicon chips and laptops and travel way back to the 1840s.
Okay, so here she is, Augusta Ada King, the Countess of Lovelace. And yep, this is the person who many people say wrote the very first computer program. And the craziest part, she did it way before the first computer was even a thing.
So how on earth does a countess from the 1800s become a tech prophet? It's a fascinating story. And it's not just about code. It's really about a unique mind that was shaped by two totally opposite forces. Okay, so her story really kicks off with her childhood, which was, well, pretty unusual. It totally set the stage for everything that came later. So check this out. Ada's parents were like night and day. On one side, you have her dad, the famous and kinda infamous romantic poet Lord Byron. Total passion, artistic temperament, the whole deal. On the other side, you have her mom, Anne Isabella Milbank, who was all about math and was seriously worried Ada would inherit what she called her husband's poetic madness.
Now, Byron wasn't really in the picture. He left England when Ada was just a baby and died when she was only 8. So her mom took charge and was absolutely determined to stamp out any of that poetic madness. Her solution? A super strict education, just packed with math and science from a really young age.
And yeah, it was a pretty tough childhood, not just with her dad being gone, but she also got really sick. I mean, at one point she had measles so bad it left her paralyzed for almost a whole year. But even with all that, her mind was just always buzzing with curiosity. You can see this mix of logic and imagination even when she was a little kid. Get this, when she was just 12, she decided she wanted to fly. But this wasn't some daydream. Oh no, it was a full-on project. She started studying bird anatomy, researching materials for wings. She was even going to write a book about it called Flyology. How cool is that?
So as she grew into a teenager, it became super clear that she had this incredible talent for math. And that talent was about to lead her to a meeting that wouldn't just change her life, it would literally change the future of technology.
All right, so this is where things get really interesting. That fateful meeting, it introduces us to the machine that would define her entire legacy. And, of course, the guy who invented it.
And here it is, the Analytical Engine. This thing was a totally revolutionary idea from this brilliant inventor, Charles Babbage. Now, he'd built other machines, but they were basically just fancy calculators. This was different. This was designed to be a programmable, general-purpose computer, all made of brass and iron. Just imagine that.
So, Lovelace meets Babbage in 1833, and she is just blown away by his machine. And the feeling was mutual. He was so impressed with how smart she was and how quickly she got his really complex ideas. He even gave her a nickname, the Enchantress of Number.
And this wasn't just a casual thing. They started this long friendship, a real collaboration, all focused on this incredible and, still theoretical machine. And it's this partnership that leads to the very document that would make her famous.
Which brings us to her biggest contribution. You can think of it like this. Babbage invented the hardware, right? The physical machine. But it was Lovelace who first truly saw and explained the incredible potential of the software. It all started in 1842. Lovelace gets this assignment to translate an article about the Analytical Engine. A simple enough job, you'd think, but she didn't just translate it. Nope. Over 9 months, she added her own thoughts, her own annotations, and her notes, as she called them, ended up being 3 times longer than the original article. And buried in those notes is something called Note G. And this is the big one. It lays out step by step exactly how the Analytical Engine could calculate this really complex sequence of numbers. They're called Bernoulli numbers. And this is what many people call the world's very first published computer program. But here's where her real genius kicks in. She saw way beyond just crunching numbers. She realized the machine could handle more than that. She understood that if you could represent anything with numbers, like, say, musical notes or letters, then the machine could process them. She literally imagined a future where computers could compose music or create art. Mind-blowing for the 1840s.
This was what she called her poetical science. It was the perfect blend of her dad's artistic soul and her mom's hardcore logic.
She was convinced that to really innovate, you had to bring imagination into science. Back then, machines were just seen as rigid calculators. So this idea that technology could be a creative tool, something for abstract thought, it wasn't just smart, it was absolutely revolutionary.
Okay, but her legacy isn't totally straightforward. There's actually a bit of a debate. While everyone agrees she was a pioneer, exactly what her contribution was has been talked about by historians for a long, long time.
So on one hand, some critics point out that Babbage himself had actually written some unpublished programs for his machine years before her notes came out. But on the other hand, her supporters argue, yeah, but she published the most complex and detailed one, and more importantly, she was the only one who really understood what it all meant for the future.
Ultimately, it might boil down to this. As the computer historian Doran Swade says, her biggest, most important contribution was seeing the conceptual leap. She saw that the machine wasn't just a number cruncher, it was a machine for manipulating symbols, moving from calculation to what we now call computation. That was basically the birth of the modern computer, right there in her head.
And today, her name is all over the tech world. Seriously. There's the Ada programming language, which was developed for the US Department of Defense. Even NVIDIA's latest graphics cards have an Ada Lovelace architecture. Her influence is just everywhere. And Ada Lovelace Day continues to inspire a whole new generation of women in STEM.
Her home in London, it's now marked with this blue plaque. And it doesn't just honor her for being a countess or a poet's daughter. It honors her as a pioneer of computing.
So that kind of leaves us with a final question to chew on. Was she a programmer, or was she the prophet of the digital age? You know, whether she was the very first person to technically write a line of code almost doesn't matter. Maybe her real legacy wasn't just writing that first program, but being the first person to see the incredible world that programming would one day build.